missing it now.
What is that? Probably about what
If you're not seated, would you please get seated? If you are a resident and voter in Warwick, you need to be sitting on the awful chairs. It's how we keep our meetings short. If the benches are more comfortable, but your vote won't count. We have 511 registered voters in town. A quorum is 5%. That's 26 voters. I think it doesn't need counting to know that we have far more than 26 voters, so we've made our quorum requirement for tonight. I will ask the clerk to read the return of the warrant.
Pursuant to the within warrant, I have notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Warwick by posting attested copies of the same at the town hall, the senior center, town hall dining hall, the transfer station, and the Warwick Free Public Library 14 days before the date of the meeting, as within directed. Signed, Constable R.N.G. Day Jr. On the 8th day of September 2014.
Thank you. I have a personal request, David. Could you help me get this light turned on? Are there any announcements from the select board?
That's what he gets the big bucks for.
I did decide to without tape on my glasses.
Tonight we have a microphone for speakers from the floor. Get used to it. It's necessary. It's necessary for your moderator, and it's necessary for probably 25% of the people in this room. I hear constantly that people can't hear, so I asked David to set up a floor mic. I know how it feels to talk into a mic. I hate it. But you're going to have to do it if you want to speak. I only have the name of one person from out of town who might want to speak. Is there anyone else who is here who is not a voter in Warwick who might want to speak on the warrant articles?
Who do you have?
Sorry?
Jim Barry?
Jim Berry. Okay, if that's all we've got, I will ask if you will give your consent for Jim Berry, who is the Western Mass Rep for the Green Communities Division of the Department of Energy Resources. If he is asked if there's a question that nobody from town can answer, is it okay if I call on him to answer? Is there any objection? Okay, without objection, it's so ordered. I want to remind you, because one of our votes is a 2/3 vote, I want to remind you of our procedure for 2/3 votes. If I hear voices that make it clear to me that one side or the other has it, I will announce that. If you disagree, stand up. If 7 people stand, then we will put it to a hand count. We passed that bylaw at our annual town meeting, and it works very well. It goes fast. we have a couple of issues here that some people have very strong feelings about, one way or the other. I want to hear from everybody. I want everyone to keep your tempers in check and remember that this is a town meeting. We are the legislature for this town. We are civil, we are polite, even if we don't agree. We do not ever, ever ascribe motives to people. We talk about the issues and what we think about them. The process is going to be this. A select board member will make the motion. Somebody will offer to be the first speaker. And that person will speak factually and not with opinion. We will get all the facts out of the way first. Then I'll ask for questions from people in the room. If you're asking a question, do not make a speech. I will stop you. Questions are not opinions. We'll get to opinions and people will have plenty of opportunity to express them. But I'd like this to go in an orderly and reasonable way. And I want us out of here by 9 o'clock. Okay, it's time for the first motion.
I move that the town amend the town of Warwick zoning bylaws by adopting the by right solar zoning amendment for renewable energy generation facilities as described in Article 1 of the special town meeting warrant.
It's been moved and seconded. I'm looking for the speaker in favor of this motion to present the facts. Your name and address, please.
Sorry. My name is Ted Cady. I'm the chairman of the planning board. The planning board recommends a vote in favor of this article. The town meeting, the annual town meeting said they wanted to adopt the structure. By right, authorization of an alternative energy facility is required. The energy facility could be solar, wind, or biomass. The select board chose solar, they chose solar on the dump lot. This is to give the town more control over it. The article that we wrote is an amendment to the zoning bylaws of our site plan review, which is by right siting, so that this facility to be located on the dump lot is by right. Now, by right doesn't mean they can just come in and do whatever they want. They have to abide by the regulations. If they do everything according to the regulations, they get approval, there'll be a hearing, they'll get approval, and they build their facility on the dump. Does this mean that as a homeowner you're gonna have to do it? No. This is only for large solar arrays. Does it prevent you as a private landowner from doing it on your land, a big solar array? No, it does not. You can get a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to do that on your own land. So what's the difference between by right and a special permit? By right means that if they do everything by the book, they will be approved. The special permit means that you can present evidence to the ZBA, they can approve it with amendments, or deny it. And that's the difference. The planning board put quite a bit of work into developing this so that it will protect the town interests. We have 100-foot setbacks, so the traffic through the Gulf won't see the solar array. And we have 100-foot setbacks so the folks who live on the road, on Route 78, can't see it from their houses. And the dump lot extends back to the base of the hill that goes up and then goes down to Winchester Road. It's a pretty sized lot. And goes over to the state property. We think they could locate a solar array there, which would probably take up, most likely, if they were to build it, an acre. Now, to be honest with you, in the short term, there really isn't much of a chance that a solar array will go in there. The nearest substation is in Wendell Depot. They would have to run three-phase wire from Wendell Depot up to the dump lot, the Allen lot, and then they would have to increase the capacity of the substation. Those two items are fairly expensive. There are much cheaper alternatives in other towns. Now, maybe in the future, that will be different, but for the time being, that's not too likely. In addition, the alternative energy portfolio is about at its limit now, and if the legislature doesn't pass some changes, the ability to build these facilities and get the solar tax credits will be curtailed. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, now it's time for questions. If I hear an opinion, I'm going to stop the person from speaking. This is not the time to debate. This is the time to ask questions for more information. So, your name and
Madam Moderator, William Lyman, 211 Orange Road. I'd like to make a motion to pass over Article 1 until after Article 2 is voted upon, as Article 1 is intended solely to provide a requirement for the green community designation. It'll never be built, it's not viable, and as such creates extra meaningless regulations on the books should Article 2 fail.
you're asking to take the articles out of order.
Right. And here's my motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We will now debate whether to do that. Is there any discussion? Are you ready to vote? Okay. All in favor of taking Article 2 before Article 1?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
It's a no.
Ask for a count.
Let's continue with our discussion. Are there any questions on Article 1?
I don't know if you heard, but I think Bill wanted to have a count. I don't know if you heard that. I just wanted to point that out.
Bill is only one person.
I don't know if you
I
heard
want to
We
count
need
too.
seven
that.
people. Are there 7 people who will stand up and say they want to count? Okay. The counters tonight are the tellers are Casey Raleigh and Zach Marchi, who will take the left-hand side as you're seated. That's my right, your left. And the right-hand side will be Brad Compton and Claudia Lewis. The way we do this is you hold up the voting card. The left-hand side will count the select board. When I call for your vote, you will hold up a voting card and keep it up until the count is done. If you're sitting on the side of the room, your vote will not be counted. You have to be sitting in one of the metal chairs. All in favor?
All in favor of passing.
All in favor
All in favor of what?
of postponing action on Article 1 until we we have dealt with Article 2. When you're done counting, you compare notes, and if you agreed, tell us what you got.
16.
23.
All opposed?
Can everyone hold the cards up, please?
Okay, the ayes have it, 38 to 25. So we will now postpone our action on Article 1 and proceed to Article 2. May I have a motion on Article 2?
I move that the town enact a new general bylaw entitled Stretch Energy Code for the purpose of regulating the design and construction of buildings for the effective use of energy as described in Article 2 of this special town meeting warrant.
Is there a second? Thank you. Janice?
My name is Janice Kirkowski, 881 Wendell Road. Would you like me to face the audience, or?
It's easier for me if you face me.
Okay. So I'm here to speak some background to the stretch code. In 2011, this came before town meeting. It failed by a slight margin. The feeling at the time was that we should wait and see where this was going. Since then, the existing base code has changed twice, and I believe the stretch code has not changed at all. Since then, many more communities in Massachusetts have adopted the stretch code. In Franklin County alone, of the 25 communities that exist in Franklin County, 16 of them have already adopted the stretch code, 9 have not yet, but Berniston and Leiden, our neighbors in the Pioneer Valley School District, will be attempting to adopt the stretch code because they're attempting to apply for green community status. If I may, I'd like to speak just a sentence or two to green communities and the reason we need to adopt the stretch code. Green communities is a mechanism by which the town can receive some money, some significant money, probably about $130,000 the first year. And that money will be spent on mostly energy efficient upgrades to our town buildings. However, the Buildings and Energy Committee are not the only people in town that will decide where this money goes. We will ask, and are asking now even, for town people to give us ideas about how to spend this money. So I'd also like to point out that in the beginning of the work that we've done on our town buildings, I have a chart here, if you haven't seen it, I'll pass it around, but in 2005 and 6, we started to do some very cheap upgrades, particularly the town hall and a few other buildings, and we've kind of run out of cheap upgrades. So the next phase for reducing our energy use in town for a number of reasons, but primarily to save taxpayer money and make these buildings more comfortable and more, let's say, maintenance free, is to upgrade heating systems, which are gonna cost quite a bit of money. So it's on the plate of the Buildings and Energy Committee primarily to come up with a 20% reduction plan.
Janice, may I direct your
Yes.
attention to the stretch code?
Yes.
Because I think people really need to hear what it involves.
So in order to get this money, we need to adopt the stretch code. So the stretch code stretches the existing building code with energy efficiency in mind. So I'm not sure if most people are aware, certainly most builders are aware that in July 1st of 2014, the International Energy Efficient Construction Code, IECC 2012, was adopted and put into place in all of Massachusetts. The stretch code has not changed in a number of years, so these codes, they might have been this far apart in 2006, but they're very close right now. The stretch code will require one of the most contentious parts of the stretch code, according to a building inspector that I talked to and some other contractors that I talked to, is the fact that you must hire a HERS rater, home energy rating system, to come and test your new home or your addition, new addition. This is only for new construction and new additions. You have to hire a HERS rater to check your work. And that, I think many people find insulting, scary, afraid it's gonna cost a lot more money. A number of reasons why this is probably one of the most contentious part of the stretch code. On the other hand, there's a gentleman that sits on our Buildings and Energy Committee who's a contractor, and he only works in stretch code towns. He has plenty of work, and he pointed out on his jobs that when a HERS rater comes, they actually can help you figure out what other options you have if the person building the home, the homeowner wants to do this and this and this. There are other ways to meet the stretch code besides a prescription that you would use if you were just building according to the base code. The other big thing is how much more money is it going to cost to build a new home or an addition to the stretch code. The last verified numbers that had been, that the state engaged a consultant to come up with was it would have cost $3,000 more on a typical 2,700 square foot home to build to the stretch code than it would have been to build to the 2009 existing base code. So now we're at 2012 base code, which was adopted in 2014. So it will not cost $3,000 more. They don't know, the state can't put out numbers right now because they need to hire that out to a individual consultant firm. So those are the two biggest problems that I think people have with the stretch code. And the third one is more of a gut feeling, like why do I need somebody coming in and telling me what I need to do when I want to build my own home? And I mean, we've experienced that in our own house, and having to put electrical smoke alarms in when for years we, had one battery operated one, and now we have to have 5, and it's like, God, we don't even burn anything anymore. But that's just the way it is, and I'm sorry, but the code can't be written for every individual home style. The stretch code was written by a number of people that have a tremendous amount of building science background and construction background. This is not just pie-in-the-sky people writing the stretch code. So I think we ought to, at this point in our town's history, adopt it, take the money, fix our buildings, or distribute the money. We have the option to do what Wendell did, and it would be to give homeowners incentives to fix their own homes. We can do that with the state money. And if it doesn't work, if the stretch code gets really wacky in the future, we can have a town meeting and rescind the stretch code. And we don't have to give the money back that we already spent fixing our buildings. So, thank you.
Questions? Is this a question, Bill?
Be honest.
I was gonna address the question of the article. Did I have to?
Sorry, I can't understand you. Would you please stand?
I didn't have the intention of phrasing it in a question. Does this have to be phrased in a question, or can I
If you
just?
have a question, ask it. If not, let's move on to people who want to argue.
I had an argument, and it was a statement.
Okay, I warn you, you get to talk once.
Okay,
When everybody else is done, we talk again.
sure. I actually, really question the ethical nature of this vote, in that the, state building code officials already prescribe what's done, and to bring it to a vote seems to supersede individuals' property rights. I do not feel that that's what we should be doing as neighbors.
David Young, 666 Old Winchester Road. It costs approximately, we learned it costs approximately $3,000 to abide by the stretch code for a typical house. How long does it take with existing incentives and energy savings to recover that initial increased expense?
Who would like to answer that? Steve Krakowski. No, please. Did you know, in town meeting, it sounds
Okay.
like an ego trip, but you're addressing the moderator.
Okay, so the question was, how much more, what is the payback on the $3,000 that that it costs actually to build in the stretch code? So right off the bat, when you build, when it costs $3,000, you need to, for the stretch code, you need to have a HERS rater come in. That's about $900 to $1,000, depending on which HERS rater you have. When you build to that code, and you also build to Mass Save Tier number 2, which is almost identical to the stretch code, you are eligible to apply for a $900 rebate, which actually covers the fee of the HERS rater. There's another grant, and I'm actually slipping. What is the other grant, Janice?
The utility incentives and rebates for high efficiency boilers.
Right. So there are utility rebates also for high efficiency boilers and burning appliances, which also apply to bring that $3,000 down. And how much is that number? Is it $500? I think it's $550. Or if we don't know, Jim Barry will know, and we can ask him to clarify that. So of that amount, of that $3,000, roughly, we can, right off the bat, you'll get back about $1,500. So that leaves that going to the stretch code costs about $1,500 more to build to the stretch code than if you didn't. And this is on a 2,700 square foot building. So that $1,500, you will, by building to the stretch code, you will save money on your energy bills. And it has been determined by the DOER, there have been studies on this that say that the payback is about $500 per year. Now, it costs you money to borrow that $1,500, so they've also done studies on that. And the quick answer is, it takes about 3 or 4 years to get the payback on that money. After that, the homeowner actually starts saving money by building to the stretch code.
Thank you. Question or comment?
A comment, statement.
I would like to be sure that we have all the questions answered before we go on to comments. Okay, you'll be allowed to ask a question if you hear something that you don't understand, but I just wanted to kind of get the facts out on the table. Okay, Nick.
As you probably know, there's been a lot of talk and no actions on the subject of climate change. Emissions continue to go up more each year than the year before. We have an estimated 500 billion tons of carbon we can put in the atmosphere, and then we have to stop.
Nick, I have to stop.
Thank you.
We're talking about the stretch code. We are not talking about climate change. We have to stick to the subject.
How these things relate to the stretch code. is that the means that have been suggested for meeting climate change are insufficient without conservation. Conservation is going to have to be done, and it's going to have to be imposed on people, whether they like it or not. There may be an ethical question about whether people can be told what to do with their own property, but there's certainly an ethical question about people being, forcing others to face heavy pollution levels, high temperatures, droughts, probably.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You can put the mic down now. Any more discussion?
Janice Kurkowski again. So one of the big problems that we've been dealing with over the last few years was our school, our wonderful school that was built in 2000, the year 2000. Apparently, the teachers have reported over the years that some classrooms are extremely cold while others are really hot, and is it a problem with the heating system, or what's going on here? Well, it turns out that had a HERS rater or some sort of building official that was inspecting the school while it was being built, if a performance-based test was done on that school when it was being built, then we could have saved ourselves hundreds and hundreds of dollars in heating costs, not to mention lost school days or discomfort levels in the school, because the gym ceiling was made out of a porous material that nobody bothered to air seal. And and not only that, they continued to build the Petersham School gym in the same way, and they continued to do the Rose School. So had the stretch code been in effect at that time, or had a more conscious or evolved building code had been in effect at that time, we would have caught that. So, I mean, the school is a commercial building, and people are in this town are probably not going to build McMansions or things like that. I just, if we are going to build new homes or make major additions to our homes, I would think we would want to build those buildings looking a little more forward than 3 years, and looking a little more forward than a 1-year payback. So I highly recommend hiring a HERS rater, or somebody that knows how to do a blower torque test and what the test results mean before we close up the walls or put roofs on or do anything in our buildings. I mean, occupant health, safety, and longevity are very important factors when you're building a home, and not just what does it cost out of my pocket today.
More discussion? Yes.
I'm Louise Dowd from 5 Chestnut Hill Road in south of central Warwick. I have a request to you, Madam Moderator, and then I have a question to ask. And I think that there's a way to put the microphone to the side so that everybody on stage can see the speaker, and the sides of our faces can at least be to the rest of the people in the room. Is that a reasonable modification to make?
I think it's a very reasonable one, and I regret not having asked that it be done that way. David, would it be easier to bring it over to the piano?
Either side will work.
This side's more lighted. No, I mean, I'm serious, it's more lighted.
People will see better. They'll see better.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
There's the energy.
So the Energy Committee can't see.
Made those mice
That's
work a
fine.
little hard.
What do you want me to do? You want me to raise it up higher?
We can move it around so that you have it going down.
Like this? Can you still, everybody, okay. Hi, guys. Okay, I have a question. I've read this stretch code basics sheet that Janice Kurkowski prepared, which is really excellent, and it it gives me a really good sense of what the stretch code would do. But the one thing that I would like to hear that I don't quite understand is more examples besides, it says under here, if I add a room to my house or renovate, do I have to meet stretch code? And then it talks about, generally speaking, you would need Energy Star rated doors, windows, and skylights. That makes sense to me. I would just like to know what other examples besides doors, windows, and skylights and an energy efficient heating system, what are the other things that would help me towards complying with a stretch code? And I have one tiny little comment as the previous co-chair of the Warwick School Building Committee. We would have welcomed having blower door tests done when we built the school originally. And I see other building committee members in the audience nodding their heads. So too bad we didn't have that. Anyway, that's my question. What examples can we give?
Where was the building inspector? I'm sure he saw all that.
It's my understanding that you can't build to the stretch code even after we voted on an addition. You're subject to the current International Building Code because the stretch code doesn't require you to go back in and retrofit the rest of your house. You don't have a baseline. And so I don't think the stretch code applies to an addition, only to a new home or a new construction.
I'm confused, and I'm going to ask Jim Barry if he would answer that.
Hi, I'm Jim Barry. I work for the state. I work for you. Thank you very much. I live in Belchertown. It's not that far, so. The question is, what's the impact of the stretch code on additions and renovations rather than brand new buildings?
Addition.
Additions. The answer is, I'll read it right from the paper, so everybody. With an addition, you have two choices. You can either use the performance path similar to a new home, whereby you hire a HERS rater, and you, so if you had a new house, built a stretch code, and later on you built an addition to it, you might want to have the whole house re-evaluated and do performance testing on the whole thing. You do have that option of doing the performance test on the addition with hiring a HERS rater. Most of us who have a house already do not have a house that's already been rated, already been tested or performed. So if you have an existing house and you're just putting an addition on, you can use the prescriptive path, not the performance path. You're not required to hire a HERS rater. You have to follow the 2009 insulation codes, which you have to follow anyway because we're now in 2014. Any new windows, doors, or skylights must meet Energy Star standards. Any new ducted heating or cooling systems outside of the insulated space must be tested. So if you put a new ductwork into a new addition, you have to make sure they were sealed, and you would do a duct blaster test to make sure they were sealed. And builders must comply with the Energy Star thermal checklist, which is a piece of paper that tells them, make sure that you check behind the fireplace that was insulated, make sure you check up where the walls meet the ceiling to make sure it was insulated. There's a checklist that someone has to pass off. So in general, an addition has almost no impact on the stretch code other than to insulate it well and put an Energy Star doors, windows, and skylights, and you do not need to hire the $1,000 outside inspector to do that work.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion?
Tom Wyatt, Northfield Road. A couple of questions for the Building Energy Committee. Well, one's for the Building Energy Committee, which is, what are your plans in terms of if you were to get this were to go forward and we have the green community and we get the grant money, what are your plans for that? Are they improving town buildings, heating systems? I heard mention about grants for individual houses being able, is that part of what you see doing with that money? I just want to get a sense of what that money is, how you see using it. And the second question is about the building, our building inspector. We still have a building inspector with Orange, or are we through the county?
Neither.
Neither. All right, I was just curious whether we can get an opinion
What kind of
from our
just hanging there?
building inspector.
I'm sorry, what about the building inspector?
I wondered if the building inspector had an opinion about the stretch code.
David? David is not the building inspector.
Fortunately. Building inspector's not here. Building inspector is also the building inspector in Wendell and New Salem. Both of them are green communities.
I want to keep the discussion of what we would do with the grant money very brief. I know that people see this as impinging on the green communities, so it's reasonable to ask what the green communities will, being a green community, will do for us, but I don't want to get off into a whole big thing about it. So if somebody could give me a few sentences, I'd appreciate it.
Dan Dibble, White Road. We have a number of buildings in town that we've already been looking at, and we've had an energy consultant firm come and talk to us about. So they are insulating and upgrading two of the highway department buildings. The town hall, more insulation in the town hall, and the old fire station and the police station. So those are all things that we're looking at as possibilities for using this money. They would probably cost more than the $130,000, so we would have to hone that down. But those are the sorts of things we're looking at.
Thank you. Discussion. Question?
On B-Train 525 Wendell Road. Tom White actually asked a question that wasn't answered properly. He asked what the building inspector's opinion was on the stretch energy code, whether he was for it or against it.
The building inspector is not here, and he is an employee of the town.
This is true, but that doesn't answer the question. You could have said that.
Well, you can't answer it for the man not here. He's
Yes.
working for two green communities in
This
the
is true.
Warwick.
I also know he doesn't approve of it.
Bob Hubbard Jr. In regards to the building inspector, seems like a lot of this hinges on his inspections. My experience is in this small community, building inspector is not always available or prompt. And I just think that if we're gonna adapt a code that is more stringent, how is it gonna be better for the community when it can't be addressed as written now? I do recall that the building inspector did not recommend.
You're
this
not
code.
gonna tell us what the building inspector says.
Last time this came to vote, he did not recommend it. So that is his recommendation as far as I'm concerned. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. I recommend that you vote according to your recommendation, and I recommend that everybody doesn't listen to what anybody says about what anybody else thinks. This is not what we do in town meeting.
Madam Moderator, I'd like to address the previous vote, and I'd like to, which happened about 3 years ago, and I'd like to take responsibility for it. It blindsided the Building and Energy Committee. They didn't even stand up on the floor. It was my action, bring it before town meeting, and nothing but a ruthless attempt to go capture over $100,000 worth of grant money. It failed, but don't make too much of it. There was inadequate preparation. I underestimated the political climate. Now we're here for real.
Thank you. Janice, and then Bill.
About a month ago, I actually called our building inspector and said, what do you think? And,
How can this be permissible?
Yeah.
No, no,
I'm sorry?
no.
hearsay.
Oh, I see.
No, I just said I don't,
Marion's right.
I told about the building inspector's
Okay.
opinion.
That's okay.
Hi, Phil Lyman, 211 Road. For the record, the count in 2011 was 39 to 20, so it wasn't really that close back then either. But again, my question is, if I choose to not clip coupons when I'm building my house, how is this actually gonna impact me? Not what are you saying now and what are you saying now, but when I go to build my house and I run out of money, you know, what am I gonna do? And that's what this is about for me.
Joe Paul, Winchester Road. I'm a licensed general contractor. I know the Energy Committee was criticizing how the school was built, and it was pretty shabby. And she said if this code was in effect at that time, it wouldn't have happened. Well, if the town had hired someone was a project manager for the town when the school was built, this stuff wouldn't have happened either. I'm not for this stretch energy code. It's another inspection, which is another delay, which is another cost. They were talking about the grants that you can get with your rebates and stuff like that. All licensed contractors can also get these rebates on all your appliances, your furnaces, all that stuff. So getting this energy code isn't gonna save you money that way. It's another expense. You gotta hire a Hertz. They have to inspect it. They come out 3 times. That's 3 inspections. It's difficult enough to get a regular building inspector out to inspect things without delays. Most of the guys, contractors, are pretty decent, you know, and they work well with the building inspectors. They'll say, well, just keep going up. As soon as I get there, we'll inspect it, you know. I don't feel it's gonna be good in the long run. Back in the early 80s, they built houses. In fact, I built a house that was a super insulated house. The house is no longer there. They had to tear it down because there was mold in the walls. There wasn't enough air exchanging in the building. The houses have to breathe. You know, I feel the way that they're trying to get these houses so tight, it's not healthy. Your in-house air pollution is horrible. Not only that, as a firefighter, what happens is we get called, we go to the house, it's gonna be a room and content fire. The second we open up the door, you're gonna have what they call a backdraft, because it's gonna suck the air into the building, because the fire's gonna suck all the heat, all the air out of the building. You open up that door, you're putting oxygen to the fire, it's gonna blow up. It puts a hazard and risks all our firefighters. And that's about all I got to say.
Lydia?
Okay, so Claudia Lewis for Rockwood Road, and I just want to mention stretch code, if adopted, wouldn't have applied to the school because it's not a living space.
That's correct. No, it wouldn't apply to the school because the school is built.
But if it was in place when the school was built,
It
it
would have
would apply
applied.
anyway.
It would have applied.
If
Yes.
it wouldn't, because it's a, so I just want to just understand what buildings that aren't living spaces that it applies to.
All buildings. Are there any exceptions?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes. I have one other question, or actually a comment, quickly.
Well,
Okay.
let's get that question answered, you can stay up there.
What's the question?
Exactly what buildings would be exempt? Public buildings.
The stretch code applies to all residential construction, but the difference between brand-new residential construction and just additions or renovations is substantial. It applies to commercial buildings, so anything that's not a residential building, like a school, or a firehouse, or a town hall, would be covered by a stretch code, but it's not the same process. It doesn't use a HERS rater, it uses a whole nother engineering ASHRAE level 2 testing system. The short story is, all brand new construction would require some outside experts to review it, but existing buildings that have work done to them do not require an outside expert to review it. It's simply the existing building inspector doing the normal work.
Come on.
Is it all commercial buildings of every size, or is there a minimum?
What do you just said, all new?
Oh, she's right, there's a difference. Anything under 5,000 feet are exempt, 5,000 square feet are exempt. Between 5,000 and 50,000 square feet, there's one level of code, and if they're above 50,000 square feet, it's an even more stringent. So based on the size of the commercial building, there are different regulations.
Okay.
You happy yet?
So is a school,
The school would have been impacted, definitely.
and what are commercial under 5,000?
So a school building, if you want to get the Massachusetts School Building Association's funds, which most towns do to get schools, the state pays like 63 or 68% of it. If you take any state money for any state buildings, for any municipal buildings, you're required to meet the stretch code, regardless of whether or not you pass the stretch code. They're not going to give you the money unless you build energy efficient way, and the only way they can prove that you're doing an energy efficient way is to meet the stretch code. So when we're talking about schools or municipal buildings where you're accepting state money, you're going to do the stretch code even if you don't vote for it.
Do you have a comment?
Almost. So the new firehouse is a commercial building under 5,000 square feet. Whether or not we vote for the stretch code, will it be required that we meet those regulations?
So if it's under 5,000 square feet, it would not be impacted by a stretch code. If you pull a building permit sometime between now and next July 1, it will not be impacted by a stretch code. If you vote yes on a stretch code tonight, it does not take effect until next July 2015. Right? Is that what the motion says? It's not, it's the sole effective date is what?
January 1st, 20.
The sole effective date is, and there's two dates on the motion. July 1, 2015. If you pull a building permit before July 1, 2015, you are not impacted by a stretch code. And someone told me the firehouse has already had a building permit pulled.
And then my comment, and I will sit down. We have an old house. It's plenty drafty. It's also really moldy. So new buildings being tight and getting mold to me is irrelevant because old, drafty, is moldy too.
Rita McConville, 211 Orange Road. I want to step back to a question that was asked a while ago about what's going to be the kickback to the town buildings and then to the homeowners. You had asked for some suggestions on what we can do with the money that kicks back. I heard an answer for the public buildings, but none for the homeowner. So one, what would the homeowner have to do to qualify for any types of kickbacks or requests of fundings from that grant? Secondly, I guess, all right, well, I'll start with a question first and then I'll do a comment. We mentioned the square footage of a building, of a public building. How about the square footage of a personal home? Does that become exempt to the stretch code if it's of a certain square footage? Or if it exceeds that square footage?
We can dance. So the stretch code has a, we talk about performance-based, and there's a HERS rating applied to it. When I was here, I had a big picture of what looks like a thermometer. And the idea is to drop that thermometer down based on becoming more energy efficient. You have to get to a certain number if you're above 3,000 square foot home, and you have to be less crazy about it if you're less than 3,000 square foot home. So there's a difference between a home that's more than 3,000 square feet, you have to get a score of 65, which means it's 35% more energy efficient than a 2006 built home. And if it's less than 3,000 square feet, you only have to get the thermometer down to 70. So there's less requirements on a normal size house, in my mind, than the 3,000 square foot house.
I guess I just have one comment. I am a healthy home specialist. That's part of my position, and we have discussed airtight homes, and it is not a highly recommendable position for health officials. They do agree that it does retain moisture, that it does retain, that it doesn't allow for air exchange. So on the aspect of health, it is not recommendable. It's okay.
Steve Krakowski, 881 Wendell Road. I'd first like to say that it is impossible to build too tight of a house. If you build a tight house, then it needs to be ventilated. So there are tests that can be done through blower doors that tell you that your house is tight enough so that it will require some kind of ventilation. Someone who builds a fairly tight house and does not have a blower door test and then says that it has mold in it hasn't done the complete job of building the house, because the ventilation will bring in fresh air and also exhaust stale air. I will be voting yes on this warrant, and I have 3 considerations that I'd like you to think about when you're making up your mind if you haven't done so already. If you vote yes on this, you will save money on your taxes. We will take the Building Energy Committee, along with whoever else would like to help us figure out how to spend the money, which we would certainly welcome your input to do that if this warrant is passed. We will save money for the town. We'll save energy, so you will save money on your taxes. That's one thing to think about, one thing to consider. Number 2, after 3 years, as I stated about 15 minutes ago, after about 3 or 4 years, even though it will cost someone who is going to build a new home some money up front, after about 3 or 4 years, they will start to save money. There is that initial investment, but they will start to save money. And the third consideration that I want you to think about is this is a chance for Warwick to take a little small step forward to think about doing a small part to try to lower our carbon footprint and address climate change. If you think about your grandkids and what kind of world they're gonna inherit, this is a little thing that we can do to try to slow down climate change. Thank you.
Tracy Alden, 25 North Holden. Thank you for talking about the ventilation requirement, but the question that I have is ventilation addressed within the stretch code itself to avoid any type of issue with not having proper ventilation in an airtight house? Is that addressed in the code?
So there's two major components of the question. One is, we're gonna make the house really tight, because we want heat to go out, and we're wasting oil. So we are doing a much more explicit job of air sealing, where the floor meets the walls, or walls meet the ceilings, around the doors and windows. And the way we see how tight it is what they call a blower door test. So after the house is built, they close the doors and windows, they put like a fan at the door, and they put the house under pressure, and they measure how many times the air changes per hour. And the lower the number, the tighter the house. The stretch code requires about 4 air changes per hour in terms of how tight a house is. In Warwick tomorrow, if you pull the building permit, under the existing new basic stretch code, basic energy code, that's not the stretch code. You have to get to air changes of 3. You have to get it even tighter. So that even if you don't say yes to stretch code, new houses in Warwick will be tighter than they were 6 months ago. The other half of a sick home, bad air home, moldy home, it's not just is there air flowing through, it's where is the insulation and the sheetrock touching. So if you have air tightness and you have insulation in and it's touching the sheetrock, there's no room for air to pass and mold. If you don't have someone doing the insulation really well, or you don't have someone coming in to look at the insulation before the sheetrock goes on, then there could be pockets of air that could cause mold with or without proper air sealing. But both the stretch code and more importantly the new 2012 code that just took effect in July of 2014, which requires even more air sealing, both require mechanical ventilation. So with the stretch code you would have a small low wattage fan on in the bathroom 24/7. If you don't pass the stretch code, you're likely to require a energy recovery ventilation system. These cost more money, but they prevent the possibility of sick homes or no ventilation. Did I answer the question?
Did I see your hand up? Jim?
My question hasn't been addressed yet.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
My question hasn't been addressed yet on how the homeowners, are you planning on addressing this after in their process?
I had that. I'm not sure this.
Is it on? Jim McCrae, 444 Wendell Road. You know, I was at the part of the early presentation done a few weeks ago, and Jim Barry was making a point, as he did right now, about how the stretch code as currently written does not, isn't that different on many energy efficient parameters of energy efficiency than the current building code. So considering that, I have a question and a speculation, I guess. So the first question is if it's so close to the current building code, outside of the fact that we would be, people would be hiring an outside consultant to verify the compliance, and that it specifies that Energy Star rating windows and doors and heating systems need to be used. The first question is, are there other significant differences in between the stretch code and the current building code? Because that doesn't seem like a whole lot. They, $1,000 for the radar, and is that other imagined $2,000 simply in the windows and doors that are spec more spec highly? And if the response to that is the stretch code comes pretty close to the current building code, then why are we being urged and kind of why is money being thrown at us to pass it if it's so close to the current code, as Jim was suggesting? And I guess we're getting to that later, and when it's the, I can't remember how it's worded, it's written as a solar, by right of solar installation, but when it was presented to us, it was by right of, please give me the language, Janice, I don't know it. As of right signing, when it was presented to us, it talked about a variety of energy, renewable energy generation facilities, and I'm wondering if that is what a lot of this, what a lot of this is about. And I'm wondering if it wasn't solar when it was first presented to us. It also talked about wind and biomass, and I wonder. To me, that's much more of a concern than all this. Less of the solar.
As to Jim's question about why the stretch code, if it's that close to the building code, is there anybody on the Energy Committee that would like to answer that?
Jim could do a much better job.
Okay, come on, Jim, I just want to give him some rest.
And there's a handout up front that addresses that.
So the question is, the difference between the current code, which is recently changed, and the stretch code, which is not recently changed. Is that the gist of the question?
Yes.
Okay. So in, just could, well, let's see.
Just give us a few examples.
R ratings, start with the R ratings on the floors and the walls and the ceilings.
Okay. So the R ratings on the floors and the walls and the ceilings with the brand new code have gone up substantially. The R ratings in the stretch code do not exist. With a stretch code, what you do is you model the whole house where you look at what is the insulation in the walls, what's the insulation in the ceilings, what kind of a heating system you have, how efficient is the heating system, how many windows do you have on the south side of the wall, the building, how many windows do you have on the north side of the building, how big are they, what's the quality of the windows, what's the quality of the heating system, and you take all of those factors together and you put it into a computer model that kind of says, where are we compared to the 2006 building code, and are we more energy efficient than the 2006 building code? So with the stretch code, you have an option of trade-offs. If you really wanted some huge glass walls on the north windy side, and the computer says, you know, that's really going to kill your energy efficiency, you can say, well, I'm willing to do that, and in exchange, I'll have more insulation in the ceilings. Or maybe I'll have a super duper energy efficient heating system. So you can make those kinds of trade-offs. But with the current 2012 code that just went into effect in 2014, R38 in the ceilings and whatever those numbers are, you have no choices with those. You must follow them. And you must meet a air change of 3 air changes per hour, whether you like it or not. So stretch code offers you some choices. So the question is, well, if the stretch code is so close to the new code, why are we even talking about this? The answer is they're trying to nudge us along to be more energy efficient. I spoke about the 2006 building code had certain qualifications. You could use 2x4 walls and just R13. Well, then the 2009 code came out and says, well, you know, you really, to build a house with 2x4 is going to be tough. In 2012, you've got to use 2x12 walls and fill them with insulation to get to the right R value. So them, us, our representatives are always, just as they keep elevating the miles per gallon required in cars, We may or may not like that. Just as they require us to have airbags in the cars, we may or may not like that. They're requiring buildings to become more energy efficient because we spend 1/3 of our dollars in America on heating and cooling buildings, most of which comes from fossil fuels that are finite. And some of that fossil fuels come from people overseas that don't like us. So there's been a political decision by your representatives, elected representatives, rightly or wrongly, to nudge us along to energy efficiency cars and energy efficiency homes, energy efficiency buildings. And it's going to get only more of that in the future. So in 2015, when there's a new building code that comes out, it will be more energy efficient than the 2012 code, I have no doubt. And there may or may not be a more energy efficient stretch code in 2015. There are some that say you don't need another one because it's already getting better, so just forget about it. There are some that say you'll never see another stretch code. We're going to get a new governor in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, and the whole thing could just be done. So I think that was probably a much longer answer than you were anticipating, Madam Moderator.
I think that was adequate.
Thank you.
I want to get back to Rita's question about the $130,000 that we've been told comes to a town that becomes a green community. To try to encompass the question, what are the restrictions and what are the requirements for using this money? Is it only for municipal buildings? Are grants possible for individual homeowners in distress? And who makes this decision?
So the money has to be for energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects. When we started, we assumed it would all be spent on municipal buildings because one of the criteria is to examine your own buildings and make a list of things that you can do to save taxpayer money, so instead of spending it on oil, you could spend it on salt. The town of Chesterfield said to us, you know, we've done quite a bit of work in our town buildings already, and we'd like to encourage our residences to also do energy efficiency in their own homes. Can we spend some of our money on our town residences? And we said, yeah, why not? But we don't want to be writing checks to individual homeowners, so it's a town, when a town becomes designated as a green community, then the town fathers, someone has to send us a grant application that says what they're going to spend the money on. The select board has to sign off on that application. So if in that application it includes things like a boiler and some insulation and a small pot of money that could be set aside to give to the residences, what we said when Chesterfield asked us that question, we said, well, we should tie that in with the Mass Save program that already exists. So as you know, you can get a Mass Save energy audit at your home. They'll come out and they'll do some things for free. They'll do other things that cost you money. They have 0 interest loans for insulation projects. They pay like up to 75% of an insulation project, up to $2,000. So Chesterfield said, well, if our residences get one of these inspections done, and there's a list of things that we could do in our home, and we follow it based on their recommendations, can we get money from the town to pay the part that the Mass Save doesn't pay? And we said, if you want to do that, you may. So Chesterfield has done that. They did 23 homes their first year. The town of Rowe also started it. They've only got like 4 people have signed up so far because it's just starting. In the town of Wendell, they just became a green community about a year ago, and they're also starting that kind of a project where most of the money goes to town buildings to save taxpayer dollars so we can buy salt, but some of the money goes back to residences who had a Mass Save energy audit and don't have the extra, $800 or $700 to do the job. So the town helps pay that difference with our money.
Great. This is Lee.
Are you registered in town?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
My name is Lee Youngblood. I live at 77 Hastings Pond Road. And I'm personally affected by this vote in a couple of ways. Michael and I plan to build a new home, and so we'd be affected by the stretch code if it's put into effect. And what I like, one of the things I like about it is that it's taking action for energy efficiency, which is related to the climate, at a personal and local level. So we can personally decide that we want to, with or without the stretch code, personally decide that we want to have an energy efficient home, and I feel really good about that. And if the town becomes a green community, then it just makes me feel like, you know, the community's doing what it can for a bigger problem, which we can't always count on the federal government or big corporations to take care of energy, but we can do something close to home. I also have a granddaughter. There she is, a year and a half old. And the way I understand it is that about $1,500, you know, the net cost at most to build a house to the standard, that's $500 a year for 3 years. It's about $1.50 a day that I have to pay. So she has a, you know, a better world in the future. And I'm willing to pay $1.50 a day for that. But I only have to do that for 3 years. And then I start getting paid $1.50 a day. Because somebody said I was going to save $500 a year on the heat. So I'm going to get paid to make this a better world. I'm going to vote yes.
We've come to the point where I want to ask if there is anyone who has anything to ask or to say that has not been asked or said already.
Thank you.
Drink hard. Okay, in this order, Louise, Bill, and Gloria. And Janice. And Pamela. I hope you remember the order because I'm not keeping it in my head.
Luckily, I'm first. I don't have to remember anything else. I asked a question before, so now I want to state some opinion, but also my question wasn't directly answered because it was interpreted that it was about just additions, and I was really asking for more examples of, you know, new construction also. I'm piecing it together now that I've been sitting in this meeting and listening. And the sense I have now is that the 2012 Energy Code has a lot of, you know, pretty strong, I mean, our house wouldn't pass. Of course, our house was built in the 1780s, but, or 1790s, but, you know, foot-thick walls. I don't know what, and one of the questions I asked I didn't really get answered, but I'm getting an idea now that maybe the current R rating for walls is 38 and the current R rating for attics is 49 or something. I'm not sure if I'm close, but the sense I'm getting now is that this stretch code gives a home builder more flexibility. That the 2012 code is really fairly strict about, you know, air tightness and R value. In other words, you know, resisting the heat going out your walls. I was actually on a committee when I worked for the State Energy Office many years ago that was debating changes to the building code. I was on, you know, a statewide committee, and we got lobbied by construction people, and the code then was R13 walls with 2x4 construction, and there was a really strong lobby against going to 2x6 construction walls so that you could put more wall insulation into a heavier amount of insulation in attics. And the same issues about moisture and too much, you know, air tightness came up then. Look where we are now. The current building code is, you know, way past that. So now I wasn't sure whether I was going to vote yes or not on this, but now I'm pretty clear that if you do the stretch code, you can make trade-offs and you can use whatever new alternative energy or old alternative energy strategies that you want that together contribute to a more energy efficient home versus the 2012 code, which is going to give you requirements for wall insulation and attic insulation and door and walls, etc. So at this point, I'm feeling much clearer, and I think that it's a good thing. And I also hold in my mind the thought that Janice gave us, which is, you know, if this becomes unworkable, we can rescind it. But it doesn't look to me, I mean, the worst thing about it is having to hire somebody to come in and do the testing. But it looks like the numbers look good on that anyway. So I'm going to vote yes. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the people who are told to speak to come down here and sit on the front row so that we can save time in walking up and down.
Bill Lang again. There's a lot of fear tactics that are going along with this, and I just really want to say you don't need to take a course in logic to understand that building to 2012 code instead of stretch code isn't going to kill anybody's grandkids. Okay? This is about building houses here. It's not about what the rest of the world's got going on. Warwick has a tight geography. We're not going to be building many houses. I'm personally opposed to this because I believe the impact to me is not going to be $2,500. It's going to be over $10,000, and I don't know how much more. But I'm not voting for it.
Claudia Lewis again. And the reason I am going to vote for it, and I'm going to add my number 4 to the list that Steve made, I guess it would be 4 and 5, is 2 things that haven't really been talked about. Instead of thinking about climate, other countries, fossil fuels, thinking about comfort and about cost. And until we moved to Warwick, Zach and I have rented, I don't know how many apartments and houses going back to like 1990. The amount of money we've spent on heating those is crazy. To think of our kids growing up in Warwick, maybe wanting to stay here or move back, I want them to be able to afford to live here. And if that means that their energy costs are lower, because today we pass this and we move forward, and the houses are tighter as they're built, whether they're new or additions on houses that become, let's say, an old house with an addition as an apartment. I want my kids to be able to afford to live in them here, or, you know, maybe they'll build their own houses, I don't know. And comfort, you know, it's really cold and drafty, and if my house was tighter, I would be more comfortable. So forgetting about the bigger stuff, just comfort and cost.
Thank you.
I'm going to make it really quick, but I have some comments for people who already spoke. One was, how can this money be spent? It's not in the hands of any one committee in this town to decide how the money's going to be spent. In fact, one of the things we need is a fuel reduction policy, seeing that our vehicles are exempt from new purchases of buying efficient vehicles. So we need the whole community to come together and give us, not give us, to provide input of how do we address that. And what Wendell did and Chesterfield did is, I think this town would really applaud that kind of money kickback to homeowners to help them pay for you know, the mass save energy audit, what the state won't cover through the mass save program. I want to talk about air tightness in houses, just use our house as an example. That I think the average the number is 6 air changes per hour, I believe, is the average existing home air changes per hour. The stretch code says you got to get to 4. The existing base code says you got to get to 3. When we did a makeover, the you know, remodeling of the exterior of our house last summer, we got to 0.23. We are still alive. So our house is very, very tight. We had mold problems before. We might have mold problems now if we weren't paying attention to condensation. Our house is much more livable and will be for the next generation, whoever inherits our house. I wanted to address Joe Paul's comment about delays for inspectors. I'm not a contractor, so I don't know what it feels like to be waiting for a building inspector to come, never mind a HERS rater. I would hope that the HERS rating system, which I heard was probably the most onerous part of the stretch code, that would improve as more and more HERS raters get trained and arrive on the job promptly, especially if they're getting a check from the state for $900. The school had no project supervisor at the time. I don't know why for that fact, I wasn't here. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But Peterstown School gym got built with exactly the same materials. The Rose School was built this summer exactly the same way. Had there been somebody on site doing, really assessing this, and somebody trained in building science, they would have picked this up.
Janice, I don't want to talk about the school anymore, please.
Okay. And, I feel like this is called like emissions testing for homes. I'm not a contractor, like I said, but I am I'm a retired car mechanic. And when emissions testing came down the pike in the 1970s and 80s, I was pretty ripped, and I thought it was gonna put me out of business. And in fact, it made my job a whole lot easier and my neighborhood a whole lot more breathable. So I think that's what we're facing right now for our homes.
Hello, my name is Pam Kimball. I live at 36 Smith Road in Warwick. And I work for a company called Transformations, which is based in Townsend. We build zero energy houses, which are a HERS rating of about 20. So the stretch code, the normal code being like 70 and 60s right now. We're building to 20 and we add solar to the house to make it a zero energy house, which means it produces as much power as it uses for heat, hot water, and electricity. And the reason I mention that is that that we think about that air kind of exchange that has to happen in the house. So our houses are quite tight with foot-thick walls, either filled with foam or cellulose. And we have a bathroom fan that we run continuously at 30 CFM, if that means anything to anyone here. I know it does. So we just try to make sure that we're constantly exhausting some air from the house, and then as doors are opened and windows are opened, that it pulls the air in, because we believe that air quality is really important. There was an article that I wanted to reference, basically published by this man, Coda Ianto, who works with the Building Science Corporation in towards Boston. And they did a study on 3 of the wall systems. They had many sensors in them. And these are the foot-thick walls with both foam and cellulose. And they wanted to compare to see if there were moisture issues. And as long as you had some kind of ventilation in these homes that they studied, which were all Transformations homes, you were able to get enough fresh air into the home and not have mold issues in the walls. And as builders know, the wall envelope is very important, the way you put that together. But putting that together smartly and having the ventilation at a constant low level. And then as you go in to take your shower, you put the light on, it boosts the fan up. That was able to deal with the moisture issues that were of concern. So I support this strip code. I want to see our taxes lowered. I believe in getting our town buildings up to snuff, or whatever we can do to save on oil and electricity. And I think I would love to see people save money over time. On their own homes after those first 2 years, and maybe if we had a fund, it could be either grants given to Mass Save, or it also could be a revolving fund, which would could be paid back to the person over time. So thank you.
Thank you. The question has been called. Is there a second?
No.
Second. The question has been called. All in favor, if you've heard enough debate and you have enough information, you want to vote yes to call the question. If you want more discussion, you want to vote no. All in favor of calling the question?
Yes.
Yes. Let me hear your voices.
Yes. Yes. Aye.
Yeah. Okay. All opposed to calling the question? I guess you guys want to vote. All right, the vote is on whether to adopt the stretch code. You've heard a lot about it. I'm sure you've had the opportunity to form an opinion. And I'm going to ask for a hand count, so get your voting cards ready. And the tellers will take their places. The people counting this side of the room count the Energy Committee on the select board. Okay, all in favor?
Mary, are you calling the question or are you voting on the article?
voting on like?
We're voting right now.
We're voting on the article.
We're voting on the article. Voting on the article.
If you're in favor of the stretch code, you have your hand up.
Madam Moderator, are the tellers voting?
They can vote.
I don't see their hands up or down.
Yeah, they don't have to, they can add their.
Okay. Thank you. 23.
22.
Sorry?
22.
22?
Yes.
All opposed?
We got 10.
All right. You count.
Hands up again, we have to count. Sorry. No people or no? No.
Call me again, and again, and again.
No, really counted.
23.
23.
23.
The vote is 45 yes, 33 no, and I have it. And motion is adopted. We now go back to Article 1, which will require a 2/3 vote. And I'll start by asking, are there any questions? You want to refresh your memory about what Article 1 is? Are there any questions about Article 1?
I myself don't quite understand what's going to happen here now, and I want a clarification of this. By this, as I understand it, and whether I'm right or not, I don't know. But in order to be granted a green committee or green community thing, we have to vote in something like Article 1. Am I correct? Okay. So now, if we do not adopt Article 1, this automatically will throw out the vote we just had.
No.
No, it won't. There are 5 things the town has to do to qualify as a green community. We are being asked to do the 2 that the town can't do without our approval. We've done 1. If we do the other, we become a green community. But nothing negates the vote that we just took. We have adopted the stretch code. Bill Lyman. This is a question, right?
Actually, it's a statement, Madam
It's a
Moderator.
question. Where you sit.
All right, this
If
is,
we're not ready yet, I want to hear questions first before we have opinions. That's the way we do it in this town meeting. Are there any other questions about, okay, Jim?
If I can just speak from here, if that's okay, or do you want me to come on up? I'll come on up if you. It's pretty brief, it's just that this is by.
You're not up yet, you're not up there yet. There you go, Jim, let her rip.
This is by right solar zoning amendment. When we were talking about this previously, it was a by right renewable energy regulation that had to pass. And I just want to clarify, is this strictly about solar, like the second line says, or does this also commit to by right acceptance of, for instance, biomass that was mentioned in the meeting? That was my question.
David?
This is exactly what it says, Madam Moderator. It's by right, it's solar only, and it's the Allen lot only.
Allen lot only.
You know what the Allen lot is?
I believe so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Tracy Alden, 25 North Holden. My question is, I'm sort of ignorant to this, and I'll excuse myself for that. But to me, there's two types of solar power that I am aware of, and one of them is good, and one of them is not very good, in my opinion. And the good one is photovoltaic power.
Ask the microphone.
Yeah. And the other one, which both I'm assuming are considered solar arrays, whether they're photovoltaic arrays or they are reflective mirror arrays, which is something new that's sort of surfaced in at least in my knowledge of solar power. So my question is would passing this particular zoning on solar arrays allow for any type of solar power plant to be put in this location, or is it specific to photovoltaics or something else?
Mr. Katie, could you give us an answer?
Ted Katie, Chairman of the Planning Board. We do not anticipate the mirror reflector type of installation for our area because of the environmental nature of our, we just, we're not a desert. They're well suited to deserts and not so well suited to here. However, I'm trying to think of whether somebody could slip it in sideways or we weren't prepared for it. But I don't think that they could because of the way we have written this, and also because it's on a lot where the select board has control as the owner of the property. It's a town lot, so I would say that the answer to your question is that it would only be the standard solar arrays that you're used to seeing here in Massachusetts.
Are there any more questions?
Martha Morse, 555 Winchester Road. I'm just confused about something that Clyde asked a question that if Article 1 does not pass, it would negate Article 2, and the answer was no, it would not affect Article 2 that we just passed. But it says here, one of the requirements is to have a by right zoning bylaw for a large, and one of the requirements before becoming a green community. So we have to pass both of these articles in order to become a green community?
If we want to become a green community, yes, we have to pass Article 1.
Okay, but passing the stretch code, which we just did, would still enable us to get the $130,000 or whatever? No. So essentially, I guess I'm confused. Essentially, we need to pass both of these articles in order to get
Well, I can't see
the
that.
grant money.
Yes, yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Steve, do you have more of an answer? I'm sorry?
Would you like me to clarify it?
I can't hear you.
Would you like me to clarify on that question? The answer or no, anyone else does.
Martha, are you satisfied?
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
We got satisfied.
Any more questions? Okay, argument.
I actually don't have an argument. What I was gonna say is, basically, we passed Article 2. It doesn't make sense at this point not to pass Article 1. Not that I'm happy with the results of the first, but it makes quite a bit of sense to gain the money.
Any more discussion? Argument, by the way, doesn't mean fighting. It means making your case. Any more discussion? You ready to vote? Okay. I need a 2/3 vote. Now, before you hold up your voting cards, our procedure allows me to ask all in favor and all opposed. And if I am sure that there are at least 2/3 of the people voting in favor, I will declare it a 2/3 vote, and you will not have to count. If I declare it and you disagree, you saw what happened before, do it again. You're welcome to. All in favor of adopting or passing the motion under Article 1, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's a unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
Good. Good.